We are moving from one fun topic to a series of other fun topics. So if we could everyone come, close the door, let's get going. We have a lot to do today. Welcome to everyone at the meeting. If everyone can please take their seats so we can get going. We have significant and very substantive work to do today. While this is a meeting of the Audit, Risk, and Compliance Committee, given the materiality of issues before us, I encourage every member to fully listen and engage in this process as we seek understanding, corrective actions, and accountability. With that, let's get started. We have, first I'm going to run through our agenda. We're going to first hear from Vice President and Chief Financial Officer Augie Maurelli on the fiscal year 2024 financial statements and highlights on the audit. We are also delighted to have with us this morning the Auditor of Public Accounts, as Ms. Staci Henshaw. Is she here? Hi, Staci. Yes, welcome. Thanks for coming. And Mr. David Rasnic, Director of Higher Education Audits, who will discuss their independent audit of our financial statements with us. And then to provide the APA and the committee an opportunity to have more detailed conversations about the audit, we will go into closed session. In the closed session, we'll also discuss progress on ongoing internal control remediations. And as a heads up, we will convene a super executive session with outside counsel, which only the voting members of the board will attend. So Augie, if you could start us off, please.
Great. Thank you, Audit Committee members and Chairperson Sheridan. Greatly appreciate this time. Before we get started in all the materials, I would just like to take a moment and acknowledge all of the work of the respective teams that have gone into not just the audit, but the preparation for the audit and all of the remediation efforts, primarily kicking off last March. So be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the UPG team and Mark Rickenbaugh and Susan Rumsey, the community health team and Chuck Coder and Sarah White, the Med Center team and Sammy Carr, Melody Norback, Brendan Smith, and obviously the central academic team and Jacob Mayer and Olga Waiter, as well as partnering with Eric Shannon throughout that entire process. So I just want, when you've got 3 state agencies, a fully consolidated subsidy or entity, 10 component units, the statements are complex. It's a lot of activity, so it certainly takes a village. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware that a lot of people doing a lot of work in this regard.
Yes, and Augie, we are deeply, deeply grateful for your work. Porter and I could not have navigated this particular several months without you and your team, and the amount of work you're doing. It's multiple jobs in one. So thank you, and to every single person on your team and to the APA for their patience and work with us as we navigate some tricky issues.
Appreciate that. And as we're getting through the slides, just from an agenda perspective, we are closing out the audit this year for FY24 to provide some look back, and the APA will go over these in more detail. But fiscal year 23, we had 12 management points. We were able to fully resolve 9 of them. Simple math will tell you we did have 3 carry, and we'll talk about those. And then we actually have 3 new ones, which will also be discussed by the APA. But a 50% reduction in our management points, I think, symbolizes some of the work or the improvements that we're making, knowing that we still have more to do, right? From a financial statements perspective, I was going to roll through our statements quickly, and maybe since we are pressed for time, I will expedite that even more, but rest assured, we can go to the next slide, David. Might be a tough slide to see on the screen. I just wanted to call out a couple of things for FY year 24, which is a June 30 close, so these numbers slightly different for those of you that were in HSB yesterday. Eric reported on Q1 activity. This is full fiscal year as of June 30. Positive change in net position of $757 million. That's at the bottom there, circled in orange. 2 main drivers on that: investment income and net patient revenue services, both with close to double-digit growth. The primary driver on the operating expense line, and there's 2 of them, and I should take a pause. This is a screenshot from the management discussion and analysis. It shows up on page 5 of your statements when you get them. And then there's a more detailed expense and revenue breakdown on page 22 of your statements. But the operating expenses grew primarily in supplies and services. No shocker there, and aligned with increased service lines and inflation, and then compensation and benefits. As was mentioned in Finance Committee, we're a people-intensive business across the enterprise, so increases in salaries, increases in benefits, and headcount will all contribute to that. We'll move on to the statement of net position, otherwise known as your balance sheet. Current assets increased to $143 million. That's primarily receivables associated with patient care. Long-term investments now sit at $11 billion from a records and visitors perspective. We'll talk about the component unit activity as well. That's due to 7.5% annual returns from UVA, so greatly appreciate them returning to a more historical norm in that regard. Capital assets now at $5.5 billion. That includes Shannon Library renewal, the Football Operations Center, and Contemplative Commons, all coming onto the balance sheet. And everyone always asks what's other in that non-current asset line. That's a reduction due to the spending of our bond proceeds, primarily around the 2020 and 2021 series. Current and non-current liabilities increased $41.9 million. I call that out only because it's related to two new GASB implementations, the lease standard of 87 and the software, the cloud-based subscription software, which is GASB 96. And we have footnotes on all of this for those of you that want to delve deeper when we have more time. But all in all, a healthy balance sheet, $18.7 billion in resources, $5 billion in obligations. And most of those obligations are long-term debt at, call it $3.3 billion, and then the rest is usually payroll related. There are some other things. There's activity from a component unit perspective. We do have 10 discretely component units. They're material to the statements. We do not present every UAO. As a reminder, the 10 that are presented are the Law Foundation, the College Foundation, Darden Foundation, Alumni Foundation, Jefferson Scholars, Athletics Foundation, the UVA Foundation, UPG, UVMCO, and UVA Imaging, right? So 9 UAOs and one wholly owned or a partially owned component unit. Total investments on UVMCO now at $15 billion across the directors and visitors long-term pool, as well as all of the other entities. We can break that down for you. If you have questions, just come see me. And some great activity from a net patient revenues. UPG and Imaging combined for almost $550 million in activity. And the overall net position of these component units increasing almost, call it $180 million. So strong performance, not just from the directors and visitors, but across all the entities. Quick summary on the redesign of the statements. We've talked about this in previous meetings. We are now segmented. We have a presentation that will provide, did I skip a slide? There we go. Yeah, here we go. Financial statement redesign. Next slide. Yeah, so we've talked about this, fully segmented statements. We've added footnote disclosures to include anything that would have been included in the medical center statements. And we've converted all component units that report in FASB to GASB. I'll provide a schedule of where these all sit within the statements and the appropriate footnotes, but a much more granular look, and it should provide much more transparency. More importantly, it eliminated the need to audit two separate set of statements, and we did see some real efficiencies from a timing perspective as this process. Our financial statements are through cold read, and we're just, as I'm sure we'll discuss with the APA, just waiting a couple more operational hurdles before we get audited. And lastly, there were some GASB implementations that impacted us. I'm going to try to go from memory. I believe one was the micro asset capitalization that had a $9 million positive change to our net position. If you like GASB standards or have problems sleeping, come see me and we'll walk you through what that standard entails. And then we did have a change in how our fixed payer interest rate swaps are accounted for. We have the Series 2000A bonds did have some interest rate swaps attached. The change in their value is now reported in other non-op revenues. It no longer categorizes as an investment per GASB. So that was a $3 million reclass on the statements, but certainly not a huge number. So in closing, we will have statements probably within the next week. I'm more than happy to follow up with any and all of you if you have more detailed questions. And I think at this point now, everyone would like to hear from our special guest. So sitting to my left is David Rasnic. He has been our in charge and project manager for the Auditor of Public Accounts for the last 3 years. Been a phenomenal partner. And then I will step back and allow Staci Henshaw, who is the Auditor of Public Accounts, and has been in that role since February 2021, to join and share her insights and what the team has seen over the last 6 months. And as a side, for those of you who aren't aware, Staci is a UVA alum and has her accounting degree from here, so she's got this button down. I appreciate you both joining, and I'll step back.
Thanks, Augie.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. It's my pleasure to present. I'll call it the preliminary results and kind of the status of the UVA audit for fiscal 24. Augie has touched on a number of these already, so I won't spend too much time on what the changes were for fiscal 24. And you'll see some of these show up later. He mentioned the micro assets, standard aggregate assets. That's really capitalizing groups of assets. So if you buy 100 laptops at $1,500 each, for $150,000, you would aggregate those and capitalize that as an asset, where in the past you might expense those. Then GASB 100, that was another new GASB standard, really relating to accounting and reporting requirements for accounting changes, any error corrections, and there was beginning balance impact there for both of those standards, and you would see that reflected in Note 1 as well. Augie mentioned the one set of financial statements, so it's just the consolidated. We're providing one opinion this year, and the medical center information is provided in the supplementary information section of these statements. So we always give 2 deliverables to you guys. In the past, it's really been 3 with 3 opinions, or excuse me, 2 opinions. So we're providing one opinion and an internal control report. I'll discuss the opinion first. So we do plan to issue an unmodified opinion over UVA's consolidated financial statements. And so when I say planned, why do I say planned? So it relates directly to the second bullet there, which is that our opinion references the work of other auditors for the university associated organizations or component units. So there is significant financial activity from component units. Augie mentioned specifically some of the names of those that make up the consolidated financial statements. They obtain their own auditor. We rely on their opinion. We do not audit those component units. So one of those component units, it's a blended component unit, is community health. That is a significant component unit. We do rely on their opinion. However, they have not issued their opinion as of yet. I have talked to Eric Shannon, the CEO of Community Health. He anticipates a planned issuance of the opinion next Tuesday. I will emphasize that the Commonwealth's financial statements, we do have to have those signed off on by next Friday as well. So there isn't a lot of wiggle room there between getting that opinion and signing off on the Commonwealth's financial statements. So next, as part of our audit, we do obtain sufficient understanding of your internal control structure, and we determine the nature, timing, and extent of procedures over those controls, and then issue a separate report on internal controls. We do, again, much like the opinion, we do plan to date that next Friday, December 13th, and we will issue that report within 60 days of dating the report there. So now we get into the findings a little bit. I think it's good to level set here on the different finding types. So I know we've spent a lot of time the past couple of years talking about a material weakness. So I'll just emphasize that again on what the definition of that is. You know, it's a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control such that there's a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the entity's financial statements will not be prevented, detected, and corrected on a timely basis. And really what I want to focus your attention on there is the reasonable possibility wording. On the next few slides, I'll kind of take you through where the material weakness has been and where it currently is, and that'll come into play there. But we did reissue the material weakness for the 3rd year over improved governance structure and resources surrounding the financial reporting process. I think it is important to note on here as well that the community health auditors, they also are issuing a material weakness to community health over similar areas that I will detail later. Community health uses the medical center's control environment for the majority of their business processes except for payroll. So here is, I just want to walk you through a little bit about where we've been and where we are. So, because I think that's important to level set where we were in 2022 and where we are now. So in 2022, really there was a root cause problem. It was the acquisition of Community Health that exposed a number of deficiencies, certainly with the most significant of those issues being the lack of really financial acumen at the medical center related to new GASB standards and complex transactions, certainly acquisition accounting and bringing on a new hospital being the primary driver there. Then you couple that with a lack of a governance structure between the two divisions to coordinate and communicate. It really exacerbated the problem to where we were really working right up until the ACFR deadline, the state's financial statements deadline. And there was a real concern of whether that acquisition of Community Health would not only result in a modification to UVA's opinion, but also the Commonwealth's financial statements. So we did have known material misstatements in the financial statements that were corrected. And again, kind of just pulling back to, as I mentioned earlier, the standard really states it's just a reasonable possibility. So in 2022, we did have known misstatements, which triggered the material weakness. So then in 2023, as you can see, I'm trying to ratchet up that, when we have the Community Health acquisition, that really, dug a little bit of a hole, and each year there's been progress and you guys are working your way through that. So that's really what I'm trying to signify by this slide here. So in 2023, progress was made. You allocated additional resources, defined roles and responsibilities, tried to have additional coordination and communication between both divisions, the academic and medical center. White papers were drafted on new standards, complex transactions. Auditors were engaged to audit previously unaudited entities. However, the process was still immature. We still had material misstatements in the financial statements that were identified and ultimately corrected to get us to an unmodified opinion there. So really, as we move into the material weakness for this year, fiscal 24, I think it's really important to focus on the previous 2 years were really financial statement driven. There were known material misstatements there. This year, the focus is really on the control environment. And while you'll see on the next slides some numbers of what the adjustments are, they're really there to highlight that there is the reasonable possibility of a material misstatement. They do not rise to our threshold of being a material misstatement. So it's really, there's still a number there, and they do present that reasonable possibility there. So on the far right, under 2024, you'll see the 4 areas that I'll highlight later on of where we really found the most significant issues over financial reporting, journal entries, accounts payable, and cash management. So I'll talk a little bit more about the progress from the prior year because I think it's important before we get into each area. Additional resources are still being allocated specifically at the medical center. It's important to still develop those position papers over the new GASB standards, complex transactions. But I think the most important change that I recognize happened from fiscal 24 was the alignment and the governance structure change with the financial reporting team. We're really reporting directly to Augie as the CFO. You really see improved coordination and communication, more timelines established, roles and responsibility defined under one reporting group there. That new management structure with that unified reporting team, since that was in place, at the same time on the medical center, there was significant turnover. So there was a new medical center financial team as well. And that really resulted in bringing in consultants to perform a comprehensive review of the medical center environment, looking at their operations and controls. So as part of that, what the consultants identified, there's really a lack of stable processes and controls at the medical center, which really increases your risk of material misstatement specifically there. I will say the consultants did work with management to provide us sufficient appropriate evidence so that we could get there to a planned unmodified opinion and really make sure we have the evidence to support the numbers in the financial statements. So anytime you have, really a large structural change like this, it's going to take time to mature. And so I think that what is in place and continuing to move forward, that's why in the previous slide you see you're starting to work your way out of the hole that was dug from the Community Health acquisition in 22. So now I'll go through each individual area. We'll start with financial reporting. We still do see a lack of coordination and communication across the divisions, the medical center and the academic side, really to identify and capitalize purchases of groups of assets. So that really relates to the aggregate assets, the pooled assets that we mentioned at the beginning, one of the new GASB standards. On the academic side, a white paper was developed. The process had some minor errors. Medical center side really relied on an existing process, which was not consistent with the standard. And once we aggregated both those errors together, there was an adjustment made of $7.3 million, and 3.4 was restated to beginning in that position. So additionally, on financial reporting, just another instance of the lack of coordination and communication between the two divisions, specifically on the university's health plan and the intercompany transactions that go on between the academic side and the medical center side. I know this gets a little technical with the intercompany things, but I think it does highlight that lack of coordination and communication as it resulted in accounts payable being overstated by $9.1 million, and then the subsequent elimination of some of that intercompany activity. So next I'll talk about journal entries. Journal entries really are foundational to the integrity and transparency of your financial statements and financial reporting. They're used for a number of different things, from monthly accruals, contractual adjustments, some of that intercompany activity, even patient service revenue at the medical center. So lots of transactions flow through journal entries, and as I mentioned, they really are kind of the backbone of financial reporting there. And what we saw when reviewing those is really a lack of supporting documentation, no evidence of employees who entered and approved some of those entries, in one instance, management override of controls, and some insufficient management review there, which resulted in the two adjustments you see there to your other post-employment benefits liability, the related expenses for $7.6 million, and a lease liability and capital assets for $7.8 million. The one I want to bring your attention to is certainly the management override of controls. You know, we always consider that a significant risk to financial reporting at all entities, and the internal control environment. That's one of the main drivers that can lead to fraud, error, and potentially materially misstated financial statements. And I think it's important to note, and what I've seen from the community health auditors, this is one area where they found similar issues as we did in their material weakness. So next, I'll talk a little bit about accounts payable. So what we found here is the university and medical center are not accruing payables in the proper fiscal year. So basically, what does that mean? If there's a good or service received in fiscal 24, but it's booked in 25, we did not see that was done appropriately during the fiscal year. So why did that happen? Really incomplete query logic when you're looking at the transactions and when they were received and when they were booked, which ultimately the cause there is going to be management oversight and making sure that they have an appropriate query, that people are reviewing this to ensure this is right. And the result of that was an adjustment of $9.1 million in accounts payable and the related expenses. So the last area I'll touch on is cash management. The medical center did not perform bank reconciliations for 9 months. The medical center's year-end bank reconciliation was not completed until 3 months after fiscal year end. And you can see some of the large dollar impacts there. And what I want to highlight is, reconciliations, ensure the accuracy and completeness of financial statements. And by not reviewing those reconciling items between the bank and the accounting system, as you can see by those numbers there, you risk inaccurate data in the financial statements, the mismanagement of cash as well. It is important to note, I think, on those four numbers you see there, and I'll talk about them in a second, they're not adjustments that we found. They're merely the results of what the consultants and management did identify. But for not doing them for that long, I just wanted to bring this to your attention as potential impacts from not doing your bank reconciliations there. And again, the community health auditors, while not necessarily related to cash reconciliations, they did find similar issues over reconciliations in general in their material weakness.
How often is a bank reconciliation supposed to be done?
Monthly.
Monthly, that's what I thought. All right.
How many months was it that they didn't do it?
9. And then when the consultants came in, that's when they came in right around that 10th month and started performing them. So what really was the root cause here? Really, you had historically inadequately designed controls and historically insufficiently documented policy and procedures. I don't want to say it's just for this year. It's really a building of those inadequately designed controls and a lack of policies and procedures there. And you couple that with a significant turnover in the medical center financial team, it really highlighted a lot of the issues. When you don't have the controls, you don't have the policies, you bring new people in, it's really difficult for them to get plugged in and understand what's going on. One thing I want to point out is, before you can fix the problem, you have to know one exists and where to devote those resources. So I think really a lot of benefit, and unfortunately our audit is backwards looking. It is just for fiscal 24. And so I think what we see now is getting that understanding, doing that deep dive in the medical center. What are the controls? What are the process issues? That shows the desire to understand the problem and move towards a solution. So I think that is important to highlight, but our audit only covers fiscal 24. So what are our recommendations? And maybe before I get there, I'll just talk a little about why we consider it a material weakness. Just the combination of deficiencies and those adjustments, show that the existing control structure presents a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement will not be prevented, detected, or corrected in a timely manner. So what are we recommending? Continue to use those consultants and management to develop those effective internal controls over financial data and processes to produce the accurate financial statements. And then further to develop policies and procedures over those key business process areas. As I mentioned, financial reporting, journal entries, accounts payable. I don't want to say it's limited to some of those areas, but that is what we found. And I think really, as you look at those policies and procedures, include things about if there are error corrections, what's happening with the intercompany accounts and making sure there's a reconciliation done there. Looking at the accounts payable cutoff, looking at segregation of duties and the approval processes. Those are all things that we'd like to see in those policies and procedures over those cycles that I mentioned there. So I will briefly go over. So that really covers the material weakness. And if you guys have any questions on that, please let me know. I know we have a closed session. We can maybe address those there. So I will run through just quickly some of the other findings. So first, this one is the material weakness, which I just went over, applicable university-wide. Next, you'll see on the academic side, we had two findings. The first one is related to student financial aid as part of our audit of the major program that was in cycle for this year. And that the first one relates to enrollment reporting. That is a common finding that we see really across all higher eds there. Second finding was an IT finding related to improved firewall security. On the medical center side, the first finding there relates to terminated employees and really making sure there's appropriate communication between divisions so those employees are terminated in a timely manner. And then one IT finding related to improved service provider oversight. So that's really the IT side, those service providers. And then the other service provider finding relates to the financial side and the applications that are used to help support the medical center there. Okay, I'll briefly go over these quickly. Our other required communications. We had no unusual transactions or significant accounting policies or emerging issues. We agreed with management application of accounting principles after adjustments to the financial statements. No significant difficulties encountered, no disagreements with management regarding auditing, accounting, or other disclosure matters. A little bit about fraud. It's our responsibility to focus on identifying material misstatements in the financial statements that are caused by fraud. However, it's not our role to specifically aim at uncovering all fraudulent activity there. No material changes other than the GASB 100 with the accounting changes and the new micro asset implementation guide question there. And no material alternative accounting treatments identified. So what else do we have going on right now? We're currently looking at the NCAA agreed upon procedures. We expect to have a report to you guys by February. And then, as mentioned, we are currently, we have finished our work overseeing financial aid, and you will see that one finding related to enrollment reporting in not only your internal control report, but we consolidate all. We have 10 schools that we do. So we issue a separately consolidated report overseeing financial aid, and that finding may go in the Commonwealth single audit as well. So with that, that is all I have. And any questions or comments, we are happy to answer.
Question, one of your earlier slides when you talked about the unmodified opinion, you used the term business type activities. Is that a commonly used term, and if so, what does that mean?
The technical term, and so it's really just what the Government Accounting Standards Board describes. They have different types of activities. So in the Commonwealth financial statements, we have governmental type, which would be taxes and that sort of thing, and grant money. And then in a lot of our institutions, as well as things like the lottery, Virginia 529, that collect fees and basically sell services, they're considered more business type. And so it's just a terminology that GASB has come up with to describe into governmental entities that charge a fee for services.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This board and the committee take your recommendations for control improvements very seriously, and we appreciate how long you have worked through these issues with us, and we really are committed to improving and getting them done. So would you mind staying in the room to answer some questions? And before we go into closed session, does anyone else have any questions on the written reports for a turtle audit or compliance? Okay. Hearing none, will the following people remain in the room for consultation with the committee and the APA team? President Ryan, EVPs Davis, Kenton Balcom, Margaret Nolan, Susan Harris, and Debbie Rinker, Cliff Eiler, Carolyn Saint, Augie Maurelli, Eric Shannon, and Wendy Horton. All others are excused.
I need to read the.
Oh, sorry. Does someone want to read us? Oh, no, I think we do that next. I was just saying who was going to be.
Okay.
Yeah. And now I was going to say, will you read us into closed session?
Madam Chair, I move the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee into closed session to discuss the following topics. 1, proprietary business-related information about the financial operations of a medical center, where disclosure at this time would adversely affect the competitive position of the medical center, specifically strategic financial considerations and efforts in light of market and regulatory changes for the health system and expected impact of fiscal year 2025, which further the strategic initiatives of the medical center. 2, consideration of the investment of public funds in an ERP financial system where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, the financial interests of the University of Virginia and the UVA Health would be adversely affected. 3, the receipt of legal advice from UVA counsel on compliance risk. And 4, consideration of the performance of specific UVA Health employees, the relevant exemptions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, authorizing the discussion described above are provided for in sections 2.2-3711, A1, 6, 8, and 22 of the Code of Virginia.
Thank you. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. The motion carries. We're now in closed session. Susan, are we on cut live stream?
She's going to, yeah. But we don't need them to read it out. But to
Carlos, go ahead.
Okay. Madam Chairman, I move that we vote on and record our certification that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from an open meeting requirements in which were identified in the motion authorizing the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in closed session.
Yeah.
Roll call.
Second.
Somebody, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll do the roll call. Where's the chair?
Vice Chair is here.
Walking out our guests, I guess.
Mr. Hardy,
Aye.
Ms. Wilkinson? Aye. Mr. Blue?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Manning?
Aye.
Dr. Okonkwo?
Aye.
Mr. Payne?
Aye.
Thanks.
Meeting adjourned?
Porter, would you, Vice Chair, would you
Adjourn the meeting.
adjourn the meeting?
I will adjourn the meeting.
Okay,
The meeting.
great, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
My first official act.
So we're going to move on to our next item, which is another closed session meeting to discuss athletics.
I'll grab it.
We group that, that'd be great, thank you.
That, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and which were identified in the motion authorizing the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in closed session. Is there a second?
We have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. We need to,
So a roll call vote.
oh, roll call, sorry,
and then-
sorry. I'm
then
trying to
you
get up
can
to
go.
lunch for the
And please,
service awards.
please go upstairs immediately because we have special guests who are waiting for us. Mr. Hardy,
Aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Blue, Mr. Brody,
Aye.
Mr. Ellis,
Aye.
Mr. Gillum,
Aye.
Mr. Harris,
Aye.
Dr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Manning,
Aye.
Mr. Now,
Aye.
Dr. Okonkwo,
Aye.
Mr. Payne,
Aye.
Ms. Pillion, Ms. Sheridan,
Aye.
Mr. Webb,
Aye.
Mr. Wetmore,
Aye.
Ms. Wilkinson. Aye. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Lunch upstairs in the